Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome to Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. Cole Barber here with Grayson Greenhafer. It's Friday, August 30th, and that means Baylor football begins the season tomorrow evening at McLean Stadium. Obviously, we're pretty excited for that, but today, on this episode of Inside Baylor Sports, we hear from Baylor wide receivers coach Dallas Baker. Dallas is entering his third season at Baylor and is the only offensive position coach returning from last season. Former Florida Gator, also a national champion, has a dynamic personality, and as we heard from Josh Cameron yesterday, his players love to play for him. Grayson, what does it tell you about that with his relationships with his players, but also that he's still on this staff from a year ago that just saw basically a complete overturn?
He has some of the best relationships of any position coach on this staff. And I mean, it's become very apparent. Every single player loves playing for him. And when they talk about him, you can see them, really glow. And it was the same with Josh Cameron. Just really, he lit up when you asked him kind of about Dallas Baker. And I think it's very clear based on how he talks about the players as well, just how deeply he cares and really wants these guys to succeed and reach their ultimate goals. And I think that's probably one of the more special things that I got just from talking to him, yesterday.
So Grayson had the chance to catch up with Coach Baker this week, talk to him about a variety of things. I'm excited to hear it for the first time, really. But Grayson, man, I think this position we know is going to be pretty key. So here's this interview now.
I'm here with Baylor wide receivers coach Dallas Baker. Welcome in. And the first game's coming up this weekend, Coach. How excited are you?
Very excited. It's to the point now where you can't sleep how you want to from the excitement. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, you're always going to have that feeling for the first one.
Yeah, I definitely get that. And I mean, after, what happened last year and some of the struggles, how nice is it to just kind of turn this page a little bit after what has been a really successful offseason, I feel like?
Yeah, it'll be great to get the first one under our belt, because regardless how much you try to fight it, I don't care who you are, you still think about it a little bit, because you're human. And so anyone who tell you that they wouldn't, I would call them a liar, and so to be able to get that first one on your belt and also have to go the way that you want it to, it helps even more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know this offseason came with a lot of change, and specifically on the offensive side of the ball. Jake Spavital coming in as the offensive coordinator. What have you seen kind of from this new offense and specifically the passing game that just has you intrigued?
I would say really is what coach would say, simple is better, do simple better. And so it's not about what we know as coaches, it's about what the players know. And it doesn't mean as though we don't have a whole bunch of tricks or we're not taking a whole bunch of shots or we don't have running backs in the backfield. It's just saying that it's a little bit simpler, and it's not pointing fingers at anyone. I definitely have to say that. And also with that, I have to say, I would say the growth also on the offensive side of the ball is the growth of our players. And shoot, even me as a coach, I feel like I'm a lot better than what I was a year ago, which that helps, me being consistent, help our guys to be consistent.
Yeah, and I think so. When you kind of looked back at last year, and you obviously have Jake Spavital coming in, was there one thing that when you sat back and looked at last year, you were like, all right, I need to work on this area specifically for your room?
I would say the standard is the standard,
Okay.
not bending for anyone, so I played in a culture where at the time you like it, but you don't like it. But now I see, and again, I would disagree with anyone, the 4th and 1 mentality. There's a saying that I was taught, And it's like when there's no reward for something good and there's no consequences for something bad, there's no motivation. And so that's why I definitely believe in the 4th and 1. Now, I would say also, you don't treat everyone the same. I treat everyone fairly, but you don't treat everyone the same. And again, if a coach tell you he treat everyone the same, he's lying because you don't. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I would say just the standard was the big thing. When the guys see that the standard is a certain way and we're not lowering the standard, I have to give these guys credit. I mean, I know coaches say this, but this is the most fun that I had in a long time, you know, a long time. And so I would just say that the big thing was just, hey, this is the standard and guys need to reach it.
Gotcha. And this offseason, you also brought in a few transfers with Ashton Hawkins and Jamal Bell to just
hmm
kind of shore up the room, bring in some experience. What have you seen from those guys and what have they added to your room?
Both of these guys love football. That's the thing. They both love football and they don't say it. They go about it that way, you know? I joke with Ashton all the time and I tell him, hey, I need you to be a K9 and not a pit bull. I hate to say it like that, but I'm being honest, like, a pit bull is, you bring him in the house, he gonna bite anybody, but the K9, he doesn't bite unless someone tells him to bite. And so with Ashton, it's like coaches say, I'd rather say whoa than to have to say sick him. And that's how Ashton is, and I feel like that rubbed off in the room. That was the whole reason why when he was in the portal, we went after him so hard, just because of that dog mentality. He loves football. He knew a lot of the guys here, and so when you have a relationship with someone, and you see how they go about day-to-day work, it spills over to everyone. And then with Jamal, just his ability. When he come in the room and everybody see him run. So there's a nice little race between him
Ooh.
and Zoom. I mean, excuse me. So that's Ray nickname, but Monterey, whatever. There's a
Uh-huh.
nice little race. We won't tell who won,
Oh,
but when guys see that, it's like, man, he has some ability. So let me step my game up. And so, the competitive edge I talk about when you add guys like that, and also definitely can't forget Rook. That's what we call Jaden Porter.
hmm.
Rook is going to be, and I probably shouldn't say this on here, but whatever. Rook is going to be an All-American one day. Like he has, he has that mentality of no one can't tell me I can't do anything. That even goes with school. Like there's no issues when it comes to school. And I know some people may judge a book by a cover because the way he liked to dress or the way he wears his hair, and I love it. Because it makes old guys like me, and I'm not like that, but I'm saying old guys who my age or older may think like, hey, this kid is gonna be this certain way, and he's absolutely not. And then when it comes to football, like I have to sometimes tell him like, hey, I have to do some other work instead of just meeting with you. Like he loves football.
Man, that's great. You actually took one of my questions because I was going to ask you about Jaden. Obviously, he
Yeah,
enrolled in the spring and he's made quite an impression. He was,
yeah.
in the two deep basically on the depth chart as a true freshman, which is absolutely saying something. As far as some other guys in the room, Ketron Jackson and Hal Presley, I feel like this was a big off season for them. And I think you kind of mentioned that, some of the transfers probably brought, some dog out of all the guys in the room. Do you feel like Ketron and Hal really had big time off seasons and are poised to, make a big jump this year?
Uh, yes, and I give God all the glory, but again, like that's on me. I'm
Mhm.
gonna say some things that people may disagree with, but it's what I was taught by Coach Meyer and a lot of things that Coach Aranda believe in. And so I would say either I'm coaching it or I'm allowing it. And I would say the big thing with them is when you have a relationship with someone, then you can coach them, you know.
Yeah.
And so because my relationship is so strong with them, I'm able to tell them, hey, I need to be better as a coach, and you two guys need to be better. And so uh, when they see you, going to meet with other coaches, meeting with NFL teams, they see you up here late night studying film, and then also it gives you this edge and this motivation. Like, hey, I'm seeing this, and I didn't see that last year, and so it makes you as a coach go even harder. And they see you, and it's like, man, my coach is helping me get better. My coach is putting this time in, and then it's like when you're coaching them a certain way, how I coach, and anyone who tell you that come to practice, like I coach hard, like extremely hard, like extremely hard. But it goes back to the relationship piece. You know, it's like if I don't know you and I tell you your shoes are ugly, you're gonna take some offense to it. But if I got a relationship with you and I tell you your shoes are ugly, you may tell me my shoes are ugly, you may laugh, or you may ask me why. And so the first piece is the relationship piece. And so by me having a relationship with them, I'm able to tell them like, hey, this isn't good enough. Or I'm able to be brutally honest as far as before, like, hey, like you should do this. Now it's like, no, if you saying you want to play in the NFL, you need to step this up. So
Right. Yeah. And I know the other kind of thing this offseason that y'all had working for you was DeQuan Finn comes in at quarterback. And obviously quarterback means a lot for the wide receivers. What have you seen from DQ and kind of what he can bring to the table to help, your receivers perform even better?
His leadership ability. You know, it kind of reminds me of a guy I played with, Tebow. You know, like I love Chris. I was in Chris' wedding. Chris was our quarterback. I'll say this on here. I would pick Chris before Tebow just because the type of passes he threw. But as far as leadership go, like Tebow was a freshman and he would say something to the seniors. Like he's not afraid to hold people accountable because he's going to hold himself a certain way. And so that was something that stood out to me. And then when you talk to the players, that's something else that stands out. Like his leadership ability, like he's going to challenge people. And I think that's what it takes, and then his football ability that add with those two things, I mean, guys automatically draw to him.
Gotcha. What's kind of one thing or maybe a specific goal that you have for your receivers going into this first game? Do y'all do anything like that? Is there any goal or anything you have set?
Yes, score one more point than they do. That's our
Okay.
goal. Every week, score one more point than the other team. So if we win 3-2, we're happy. We'll have a pizza party, everything else. So just score one more point than the other team. That's our goal.
Okay. Anything for your wide receivers?
That is for the receivers.
That's just for that. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Here's the thing about that, right? So everybody loves winners. Okay. I have a great stat for you. And I thank the good Lord for a lot of stuff he blessed me with. And here's what I would say. Every year, the team that wins the national championship, they either have the first or the second most players drafted, right? And so speaking of our team, we won a national championship. And if you look at that, I would like to know the percent of the guys that got drafted that played longer than 3 years. And so what I would say to that is because a team wins a national championship, the NFL like to think they have great players. And that's not true. They don't have great players. They have a great team. And so that's why our goal is to score one more point than they do. If we win, let's say we go undefeated this season, right? And I'm speaking it to existence. I believe we are. Just think about how many players will get drafted, right? And so
Right,
that's why
bunch.
the ultimate goal is about the team. Like as soon as you can put the team before yourself, everything else gonna fall into place. There's something I like to say. Everything that you're chasing, if you handle what you're supposed to chase, I mean everything you're supposed to handle, that stuff will chase you. And so my guys know exactly what I'm talking about when I tell them that. Focus on what's important and everything that you're supposed to, everything that you want to chase will actually chase you. Remember that.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dallas. Good luck this weekend, and I'm sure we'll talk
problem.
again soon.
I appreciate you.
All right, Grayson. So we just heard from Coach Baker. Man, what was the first takeaway that you had? I had my general thoughts, but what was your first takeaway from your conversation with Coach DB?
I mean, there were two, and one of them is probably more significant for the present, and then one is more significant for the future. And so it's kind of that mixture of two things. But the first one that really stood out to me was just when he talked about Ashton Hawkins and bringing him and Jamal Bell in, the mindset that Ashton Hawkins brought to the team and brought to this room specifically clearly has been massive for Dallas Baker. And Dallas mentioned that was a huge reason they brought him in. They wanted someone who's going to bring just a different mindset, a different mentality to the wide receiver room, ultra competitive, very much a guy who is just going to let you know when he makes a big play, and he's going to back it up with his play. And I think all of that is really important for a room that just needs confidence. And you're not going to find anyone more confident than Ashton Hawkins. And I think that was the biggest thing for this current team and the present.
Yeah, so there's this interesting nugget on this. Coach Baker didn't mention about Ashton, but yesterday when we heard from Josh Cameron, and then 365 Sports actually did an interview with sideline reporter Ricky Thompson, and they both mentioned the size of Ashton Hawkins' hands. And I just thought that was so fascinating. Like, he's not a big guy. Like, he's going to be very pedestrian. You see him 5'9", 170 pounds, just not a huge guy at all. But the way that he attacks the football, coupled with the size of everyone's talking about his hands, it kind of makes sense of how well he catches the football. And Ricky Thompson mentioned he had 3 or 4 basically one-handed catches in the session that he saw that looked like he was catching a baseball. And for a guy that's 5'9", 170 pounds, you don't really see that very often. So I'm super excited to see his playmaking ability, but I also think it gives Baylor, and specifically DeQuan Finn, a kind of a safety net receiver that if I can get the ball in his general area, he's going to make a play.
Exactly. And I mean, the other factors with him are just knowledge of the scheme, since he's played with Jake Spavital before. So he's going to be probably the most comfortable of any Baylor wide receiver by a lot. And that's key as well, especially when you're running all these option routes and having a lot of versatility in your offense with how he's going to be used. I think they're going to move him around a lot and really attack with him. That's going to be very important. Now, the second part that I mentioned, because it was about the future, and I actually texted you about this because we have talked about Jaden Porter since the spring. And like the moment he stepped on campus, he was making plays. And it just carried through to fall camp. I've been pretty adamant that I think if any freshman is going to burn their red shirt, it would be him. And it just has everything to do with vibes and then making plays every scrimmage, every practice. And then Dallas Baker he came out and said, this guy's a future All-American. And he does everything right in the classroom, on the practice field, puts in the hours, wants to be great. And I think that is really, really cool for the 4-star freshman.
Yeah, and interesting is that he's a Waco kid. He's local. He comes into the program, and I think he kind of had a disappointing senior season, but he comes in and just basically just set the turf on fire, more so to speak. And I'm excited for his future. And I think you mentioned he's going to play this year, and he's Micah Gifford last year is not going to redshirt. And I think that sets him up for the future, because I don't think he's necessarily going to be needed in the sense that they have guys ahead of him that can make plays, but they have to get him ready, get him experience for his future. And being able to rep the scheme, it's a more simplified scheme. I think you see guys that kind of take a while to catch on to the wide zone scheme and the passing game and stuff that goes. This one's going to allow him to utilize his athletic ability and his strengths. And just like we saw in previous years, in previous systems, in the spread system specifically, it's easier for guys to adapt. And I'm excited for Jaden because of that.
I am too. And you mentioned his senior year. We got to remember, I mean, this guy was basically hurt for the first 8 weeks of his senior season. And then he comes back and was awesome in their playoff run, like really showed the flashes that made you really excited. So I think it was more injury than anything else with him his senior year. And so I think with him, though, it's really cool because I don't know that he fit as well in the previous offense in the wide zone scheme. I think he could have played the Monterey role. I could see that. But I think in this scheme, he fits even better because, he can play the slot. He could move outside at times as well. He might be asked to do that just because of the lack of depth they kind of have there. But I do think his role will be in the slot as a go-to guy, a very reliable target, but also a guy that has been able to win deep down the field, which I'm not going to say I'm surprised by that, but it's been really cool to see his speed absolutely translate to the next level because you have questions about that sometimes, but I think when you're able to have his route running ability, it allows you to create separation even down the field.
Yeah, and early in his recruitment, we knew that he loved Baylor and he committed early despite having a couple other offers and then just shut down his recruitment. So I don't know if he got the prestige that comes with going through a full recruitment that a lot of kids do because he shut it down so early. So I think Baylor has a young freshman receiver to go with some older guys that sets up well for the future, but obviously we think he can make plays this year as well. So my biggest takeaway from this interview with Coach Baker, or with your interview with Coach Baker, that DeQuan Finn's leadership is surfacing again. And for a receiver coach to mention that, and his story directly about his time at Florida and winning a national championship was he loved the starting quarterback, Chris Leak, but the leadership that Tim Tebow gave was so crucial to their run and everything. He wasn't afraid to say anything to anybody. And we knew that about Tim Tebow, but the comparison to DeQuan Finn, obviously it's hard to replicate Tim Tebow as a leader, but to even have someone that played with Tim Tebow to mention DeQuan Finn in that same vein, to me is pretty telling. Now, obviously that Florida team, that era of Florida Gators was special. And you want someone like DeQuan Finn to be as good as Tim Tebow, but I think just a leadership, and we mentioned this about talking about Gary Bohannon and the way that he led that 2021 team. If that's an X factor for DeQuan Finn on the field this season, that's massive for Baylor because guys are going to look to him to make plays.
Absolutely. And I mean, if DeQuan Finn is the leader that Gary Bohannon was, plus in my eyes, pretty significantly more talented in my opinion. And so you mix that together and that's something that could be very special. I agree. That was a big statement that he made. I actually, the whole Tim Tebow thing, we knew about it, of course, his sophomore and junior and senior year. I had no idea that as a freshman, he was just walking in there and telling seniors on a championship level team, like, hey man, like you're messing up or stuff like that. And Dallas mentioned that. I was like, wow, that's really cool for an 18 or 19-year-old to just be able to step in and command that kind of respect. So that was pretty cool. And obviously for DQ, that leadership is something that's going to be very important for this team going forward. And I think also for the wide receiver room, like to have trust with your quarterback is massive. I mean, you see it all the time in the NFL. You see it all the time in college. If guys trust you, respect you, you go out, you throw all the time when you're in the off season, those things really add up and they matter.
Yeah, I'm probably the most excited for Coach Baker, and nothing against the previous scheme, but it's for a guy like this who has a great relationship with his players. I think he has to be excited to be in this scheme specifically for those guys, to let them go get touches. Ketron mentioned it way back at Big 12 Media Days. He's like, I'm excited because I'm going to get the ball. I want to go make plays. I'm going to get it more regularly. And if you look at the targets for that receiver group last year compared to the rest of the Big 12, they weren't anywhere close. These guys are going to get more targets now. There's more receivers to get the ball to, but they are going to get more targets. And so I think for Coach Baker, I think if there is a good season, you can look at that scheme change for him to kind of elevate him as a receiver coach and the kind of what comes along with having a room that actually produces at a high level.
Right. And that's key because they have not been the most productive group on this team the last couple of years. They have to find ways to produce. And I do think this scheme gives them much more opportunities to do that and to really show their talents and their skills. I felt like it was really interesting in the interview with Dallas Baker. When I asked about Ketron Jackson, Hal Presley, and it felt like there was a learning curve there. And that there was, a tremendous amount of growth needed. And it felt like this offseason was a great spot for them to really build on, what was a really tough season for everyone a year ago. So I'm very curious to see, if those guys truly make that jump that we're kind of expecting, especially in the new scheme. But I think we also understand that we need to see it first, right? Because it hasn't been proven quite yet. We've seen flashes, but can the consistency really get there? That's going to be extremely intriguing as well. And it kind of builds on your point about if this room is going to be productive, those two guys specifically are also going to have to produce for this group to reach its ceiling.
Yeah. And interesting point before we head out of here, but Hal Presley and Ketron Jackson were both highly regarded prospects out of high school. I think that their transitions, their scheme placement, everything that they were dealing with have kind of put a ceiling on their capabilities. And I don't say that in a bad way. It was reality of the situation. I think the scheme can help both of those guys kind of get out of their shell, break through it. You hope we see it this year, because if they see it, that means the offense is moving the ball, and then the guys behind them are also going to make plays. And I think they're in a good position for this fall to go out and make plays.
Absolutely. And this is one of the groups that we've been the most excited about all off season, just talking about this wide receiver room, how much growth there's been, how much development there's been, how much maturity, leadership, the transfers. Just really feels like they made this a focal point, and understanding that in an air raid offense, it has to be a focal point. You need guys that can actually make plays in space and make plays down the field. That's what they have this year. Now it's just about, can we get to a point where there's, fulfillment on everything that's been said, about this group and everything that we've thought about this group. That's going to be key. And I honestly think we could find out quite a bit in the first game of the year, and we will definitely find out even more the second game.
Yeah, there's been a lot to be talked about with speed on this team. It starts with the receivers, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm excited to see it. All right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for today's episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. Thanks to Josh Cameron. Thanks to Coach Baker for visiting with us this week. And thank you all so much for listening. For Grayson Grunhafer, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great weekend, and sick 'em Bears.